Tonight, I'm opening a file the city keeps sealed with silence. How Paris moved millions of dead without panic. How it turned collapse into architecture. And why the most dangerous question is never, what's beneath Paris? But, how much of the city is held up by what you refuse to see? Paris is the city of light. That's the headline. That's what the postcards promise. Now, look down. About 20 meters under your shoes, there's another Paris. No cafes, no perfume, no violin in the distance, just limestone corridors, cold air, and silence that feels crowded. And then you see it. Skulls, bones, stacked like brickwork. So here's the question you can't unhear. How many people are under your feet right now? 0, 20 to 100. By the end of this file, you'll have a clean key. Not ghost stories, not tourist trivia. You'll know why Paris built an underground ossuary, why it happened when it happened, and what that decision reveals about cities that prefer their hardest truths out of sight. Because the catacombs aren't really about death, they're about control. And control always has a basement. Yeah, I don't love this part either. You don't enter the catacombs through a grand arch. You enter through a staircase, a practical descent. Step after step, like the city is lowering your expectations on purpose. The sound changes first. Street noise gets shaved down to nothing. Footsteps sharpen. Drips become loud. Your phone loses signal like it's suddenly embarrassed to be here. Then you meet the sentence. A line carved over the entrance that doesn't flirt with you. It doesn't entertain you. It just stops you. Arrête. C'est ici, l'empire de la mort. Stop. This is the empire of death. Most people read it like a prop. They smile, they take a photo, they keep moving. But down here, the atmosphere doesn't feel theatrical. It feels administrative. Look closer. The bones aren't thrown. They're arranged. Skulls in rows, femurs like bricks, tibias like mortar. A wall built from what used to be somebody's name, somebody's breath, somebody's ordinary Tuesday. And the sentence over the door? It's not a random flourish. It's a warning that tries to sound polite and fails. Here's a detail most people miss. That line is borrowed from a classic descent into the underworld story. It's the kind of phrase you'd put at the edge of a boundary, a point of no return. Paris didn't just build a place to store remains. Paris built a psychological threshold, a doorway that says, you're leaving the clean story now. And once you cross it, you realize something fast. This isn't a haunted place. It's a designed place. Not designed to scare you, designed to manage what you feel, to keep you moving, to keep you contained, to show you horror in a controlled dose. If this is an empire, it wasn't built by ghosts. So, who built it? And what problem was so bad they needed an empire of bone? Paris carved itself hollow. Paris didn't just grow upward. It grew by eating the ground. For centuries, the city pulled limestone from beneath itself. That stone became bridges, churches, facades, beauty with a price tag written underground. But every block removed left a pocket behind, a void, a hidden geometry under the streets. Over time, the voids connected. Tunnels, chambers, inspection galleries, an underground that wasn't secret, just ignored. And ignored systems don't stay quiet forever. By the 1700s, Paris was feeling the consequences. Cracks, collapses, sudden sinkholes, the kind of incidents that make a city realize the ground is not a promise. It's a negotiation. So the city did what powerful systems always do when reality pushes back. It created oversight, an inspection department, maps, rules, reinforcements, a bureaucracy for stone. Think about that for a second. A city had to invent a job category called Make Sure the City Doesn't Fall Into Itself. Human moment. I know that sounds funny. It stops being funny when you imagine a bedroom floor turning into air. And the inspection logic changed everything. Because once you map the underground, it stops being chaos. It becomes infrastructure. Corridors get names. Galleries get measured. Supports get built. A hidden world becomes an asset. And then something almost inevitable happens. If you have an asset underground, You start asking what else you can place underground. Not because you're evil, because you're efficient. Once you've built a controlled underground, you start looking for problems you can move into it. And Paris had a problem that couldn't be solved with limestone, and the paperwork got serious. A royal decree bans quarrying under public roads. An entire office is created just to track what's under the city. It's boring on paper. It's survival in practice. Because the underground isn't romantic. It's physics. And physics doesn't negotiate with tourism. Once you build a map of the darkness, you start using it. And Paris was about to use it in the most human way possible. Here's the part nobody wants to picture. Old Paris. Tight streets, dense neighborhoods, and cemeteries used for centuries, filling up. Not poetically, not resting in peace, practically. Overcrowded burial grounds, mass graves reopened again and again, bones shifting as new bodies arrive. A city trying to live beside too much death in too little space. One cemetery becomes the symbol of the crisis, the innocent. For generations, it took bodies like a machine. Eventually, the machine jammed. And when a machine like that jams, it doesn't just slow down. It leaks, it stinks, it turns into public rage. People complained about the air, about the smell that didn't leave, about damp cellars near the cemetery, about walls that started to fail, about the feeling that the ground itself was turning wrong. You don't need supernatural stories to understand panic. You just need a neighborhood that can't breathe. So the city faced an ugly equation. Space is finite, bodies aren't. And when space runs out, a city doesn't become spiritual, it becomes logistical. That's the real origin story, not romance, not goth. Crisis management. Now, here's the twist inside the setup. Paris didn't start with a plan to create a famous ossuary. It started with a plan to stop a crisis from poisoning the surface story. Close the worst cemetery, move the remains, stabilize the city, keep going. It sounds cold, but cities are built out of cold decisions. Paris didn't honor the dead by moving them. Paris moved them because the living demanded the streets back. One more detail, because details are where the truth hides. Les Innocents wasn't just full, it was so full the city closed it. That's not symbolism, that's emergency. And then the real work begins. Not the kind you put in a museum, the kind you do in mud and stink and paperwork. Exhumation, transport, cleaning, stacking. A city dismantling its own past because the present is panicking. And when the public starts panicking, the city doesn't calm them with words. It calms them by changing what they can see. The night convoys, 1430 to 1910. They move the dead at night, not as a mystery, as a method. Covered wagons, black cloth, lanterns that swing like the city is trying not to look at itself. Imagine waking up to wheels on cobblestone. You peek through a curtain. You don't see a parade. You see a procedure. A convoy collects remains from overcrowded cemeteries and delivers them to a mine shaft. Down into the old Tom Issoire quarries near today's d'Enfer Rochereau. Load after load, night after night. And the timeline matters. This wasn't a single event. It was a slow relocation of history. A city doesn't move millions of remains quickly. It does it the way it does everything else. One night, then another, until the unimaginable becomes routine. And routine is how big things disappear. This is where the catacombs begin to form. Not as a place, as an operation. And yes, there were religious rites. Yes, there were officials. But don't mistake the ceremony for the motive. The motive was pressure, health fears, public outrage, the need to stabilize the city above. Here's the part nobody mentions. The convoy wasn't only carrying bones, it was carrying a lesson that a city can move something enormous, quietly, and still call itself civilized in the morning. When a city learns it can relocate a crisis while you sleep, what stops it from relocating anything else the same way? And on April 7th, 1786, the quarries are blessed and officially turned into a municipal ossuary. That date matters because it's the moment temporary fix becomes permanent system. From there, the transfers keep going. 2 years, then more. Cemeteries across the city get emptied in stages. The surface gets quieter. The underground gets heavier. Hook. When a temporary fix becomes a permanent system, it starts shaping how a city thinks. Up to now, this feels like a story about bones. Now it becomes a story about systems. Every city has 2 versions of itself. The surface it sells you, and the hidden layer that makes the surface possible. Water, sewers, power, transit, maintenance corridors, service tunnels, quarries that became pathways, storage rooms that became solutions. A second city, built to carry the weight of the first. The catacombs are part of that logic. They're what happens when a public health crisis meets available underground real estate. And here's the quiet reveal. The catacombs weren't created because Paris loves darkness. They were created because Paris loves continuity. Keep the cafes open. Keep the streets clean. Keep the illusion intact. Now, this is where the psychological part kicks in. Because once you hide something successfully, you don't just solve a problem in space, you solve it in people's minds. If the crisis is no longer visible, the crisis feels handled, even if it still exists, just relocated. That's not evil, that's human. We relax when we can't see the hazard. But systems notice that. Systems learn from that. A city learns what its citizens can tolerate, how much discomfort they accept before they riot, how quickly they forget when the street looks normal again. And a city that can manage death can manage anything. Noise, poverty, disease, shame, anything that threatens the surface story. Once out of sight becomes a solution, it becomes a habit. Not just for death, for anything inconvenient. You can test this in your own life. If a problem disappears from your field of view, your body relaxes, even if nothing is truly solved, even if the cost is just moved somewhere you don't visit. That's why underground solutions are so seductive. They don't just clean the street, they clean the mind. And once a city learns it can clean minds, it can sell a cleaner story. The curated truth, 2430 to 2920. Most visitors think they've seen the catacombs. They haven't. They've seen a curated route, a controlled slice, a small corridor of a much larger underground network. The wider quarry system stretches for hundreds of kilometers beneath Paris. Only a fraction is lit, signed, and approved for human eyes. That matters, because what you can visit feels like a story with a beginning and an end. What you can't visit feels like infrastructure, unfinished, shifting, still being managed. And it is managed. The ground still moves. Stone still cracks. Water still seeps. The city still inspects, reinforces, closes, reopens. No drama, just constant maintenance. Because beneath every elegant boulevard, there's a practical fear: collapse. Here's a small modern detail that changes the mood. You can be standing under the Eiffel Tower today, and the city still has inspectors whose job is basically make sure the underground stays where it is. That's what makes Paris feel stable, not romance, maintenance. And the official catacombs you walk through, they're not random. They're staged in a quiet way. Not staged like a theme park, staged like a museum. A route that keeps you moving, a route that keeps you from wandering into questions the city can't answer in public. Hook. So why do the public catacombs feel designed like a message, not just storage? Here's a number that makes people blink. The public route is roughly a mile, about 1.5 kilometers, a tiny slice. The larger network beneath Paris runs for hundreds of kilometers. Some estimates put it around 300 kilometers of galleries and tunnels. Most of it is off limits, not because it's mystical, because it's unstable, unmapped in places, and not designed for visitors. And when you hear people brag about going where they shouldn't, remember this: the story isn't rebellion. the story is risk. A city built on voids will always punish careless curiosity. So if the public route is a tiny, curated slice, why did Paris open it at all? A warehouse that turned into a statement, 2920 to 3350. At first, the bones were dumped. Then they were organized. Then, eventually, they were arranged. That's a psychological evolution, because arrangement changes meaning. A pile says, problem. A pattern says, solution. A wall says, permanence. Skulls stacked at eye level. A corridor that forces you to walk beside millions of strangers, shoulder to shoulder, without a single voice. And then, there are inscriptions. Little sentences that feel like the city is leaving notes for the future. Reminders, warnings, occasionally a bit of dark poetry. This is where the catacombs stop being storage and become narrative. Because narrative is what the human brain uses to tolerate scale. 6 million is intolerable as raw fact. But 6 million, arranged, labeled, framed, becomes something you can walk through without breaking. Human moment. There's a second down there where you stop trying to be brave. You just exhale, quietly, because your brain finally understands scale. 6 million isn't a number anymore. It's a presence, and you feel the real pressure. Not fear of ghosts, but the weight of a city that decided this was acceptable. Hook. And now the twist, because the catacombs aren't the secret people think they are. In the early 1800s, officials start treating the ossuary differently. They don't just store bones, they curate them. They turn corridors into rooms. They add plaques. They add structure. They add intention. That's when the catacombs become a public experience, by appointment at first. Later, a steady stream. And once the public is allowed in, the catacombs gain a second function. They don't just hide a crisis. They teach citizens what managed looks like. Beginning and an end. Because a city that once hid its dead to protect the living, now shows its dead in a controlled way to entertain the living. That's not hypocrisy. That's branding. That's evolution. A city that can display its hidden layer can shape how you interpret it. 350 to 3800. You'd think Paris is famous because it celebrates life. But here's the darker truth. Paris became stable because it learned how to manage what threatens the surface. The catacombs weren't a shrine. They were a fix, a municipal solution, a way to move a crisis into controlled space. So, Paris, City of the Dead, is a catchy phrase, but it misses the real point. This isn't a city built on death. It's a city built on decisions, on what gets shown, on what gets moved, on what gets labeled handled the moment it disappears from street level. That's the twist. The catacombs don't reveal Paris is obsessed with death. They reveal Paris is obsessed with order. And order, when you follow it far enough, always requires someone to not look too closely. Because if people look too closely, they start asking the wrong questions. Questions that don't fit the postcard. Questions that don't fit the brand. Questions that force the city to admit the surface story was never the whole story. And here's the quiet punchline. The catacombs aren't beneath Paris. They're part of Paris. Just the part the city prefers you experience on a schedule. Modern Paris still sells you the surface story. Love, light, article, elegance. And it works because it's real, just not complete. The catacombs are the part that completes it. A reminder that every perfect city is propped up by imperfect work, by decisions that somebody signed, somebody funded, somebody enforced. And the scariest part isn't the bones, it's the calm that says, this is normal. This is how a city handles what doesn't fit the postcard. And once you accept that, you start seeing catacombs everywhere. Different form, same logic. So how many people are under your feet in Paris? Most sources repeat a number around 6 million, but the number isn't the sting. The sting is the method. Paris didn't solve the burial crisis with a speech. It solved it with night convoys, paperwork, and a controlled underground. A beautiful city isn't always a clean city. Sometimes it's just a city that learned where to hide the cost. Look closer, because once you notice one basement, you start noticing them everywhere. One more thing, because I can already hear the comment section breathing. Is it exactly 6 million? Different sources give slightly different counts. Some say more than 6 million. Some treat it as an estimate, because records are messy and centuries don't keep perfect spreadsheets. But notice what you just did. You tried to turn a human abyss into a clean number. That's the same instinct Paris had. Measure it, move it, contain it, label it, handled. And if you're wondering why people are obsessed with this place, it's not because they love horror. It's because the catacombs do something rare. They make a modern city admit, quietly, that it's built on trade-offs, that comfort is maintained, that beauty is curated, that order is enforced. Down there, you don't feel spooked. You feel supervised. Like you're seeing the machinery behind the curtain, but only through a small window the city controls. That's why the warning over the door works. Not because it scares you, because it tells the truth. You're stepping into an empire, not of monsters, of management. And once you've seen that, the surface gets louder. The music feels thinner. The romance looks more like lighting. Hook. Because the real question was never, how many are under Paris? The real question is, who decided that was an acceptable solution? Next file, we follow the same pattern beyond Paris. Other cities, other undergrounds, other solutions. Not the tourist underground, the functional underground. The one built to carry what the surface can't admit. And once you know where to look, you start seeing it in plain sight. Odd doors in metro corridors, sealed stairwells, maintenance hatches with fresh bolts. Not because it's mysterious, because it's necessary. Because the dangerous question isn't, what's beneath Paris? It's, what's beneath your city, right now?